Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into Health Podcast Show, the place to be to get the insights of leaders working at the intersection of health, science, and media. I'm your host, Dan Kendall, and this episode features a recording from the 2025 Health Podcast Summit, which was held on October 1st and 2nd. In total, we interviewed 42 speakers in 37 sessions that span topics across health, science, policy, and podcasting. You can wait to get access to all the sessions as we publish them here on your favorite platform, or you can get access to all the recordings, links, and resources by visiting our website at healthpodcast.org. Again, that's healthpodcast.org. Enjoy the show. Welcome to this session of Health Podcast Summit 2025. I'm your host, Dan Kendall. Our next guest is Dr. Bhargava. Dr. Bhargava is Chief Clinical Strategy and Innovation Officer at Helio, where she hosts the Apex Award-winning podcast, Physicianary. There's a link to her podcast in the description below. After 11 years of clinical practice, Dr. Bhargava transitioned to medical media to reach millions instead of treating patients one by one. In this session, Dr. Bhargava reveals how Helio's multimodal strategy helps physicians navigate 2 million annual publications using podcasts and AI tools. She warns how AI voice cloning threatens medical authority, making verification of authentic sources critical for patient safety. I'd like to take a moment to thank all our sponsors and partners who make Health Podcast Summit 2025 possible. A special thanks to our gold sponsor, BetterHelp, and to our silver sponsor, ZS. Please visit healthpodcastsummit.com for links to all of these organizations and special offers. Let's tune into the conversation with Dr. Bhargava. Dr. Bhargava, thank you so much for joining me here at Health Podcast Summit.
Dan, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Dr. Bhargava, I've explained to the audience a little bit about your role at Helio and the fact that you do host a podcast. So could you just, in your own words, sort of describe what your podcast, Physicianary, is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. Physicianary is really kind of a way to highlight what is happening in the field of medicine. So there is a lot of innovation happening, and there's a lot of innovators that are actually taking the reins. And that's a lot of doctors who are doing that, whether it's in research or whether it's a startup, whether it's in journalism or as an advocate. Doctors are taking a lot of leadership roles. And this was a way to kind of give them a platform to talk about the amazing work that they're doing.
But it's just one of several podcasts that Helio produces. So what is your role there at Helio, and how do you, I want to go into a little bit about how Helio approaches the use of podcasts across its media streams, but just for the audience, can you share what it is that you do specifically there?
Absolutely. Well, Helio is a really important organization in that it elevates information to doctors. There's over 2 million publications a year, and doctors are busy. They can't keep up with this information. So Helio basically uses multiple strategies to communicate that information. So it could be anywhere from like news snippets to the Helio Minute to podcasts. They have several podcasts in different specialties. I kind of head up the innovation podcast, but also videos, KOL discussions, and they're also at conferences. So Dan, at the end of the day, like I'm very passionate about communication because the thing is that you could have the best research in the world, you could have the best product in the world, but if you don't get it out there and actually let people have the awareness of it, then you're not empowering them and you're not allowing them to actually see all of that can help in their health.
So can you explain for the audience a little bit about your personal transition from medicine into the world of medicine and media?
Absolutely. So I worked for over 11 years as a full-time clinician in various roles in the hospital, in group practices, on system protocols, in research, training other trainees. So I did a lot of different roles in that, and I loved it. I love patient care and I love promoting health. But when the role came up at WebMD, I was super excited, Dan, because it actually gave me a macro version of getting education information to patients. And so it was scalable. It was just the same thing I was doing patient by patient, in my opinion. But now I was being able to empower millions of patients, and actually on the Medscape side, physicians as well. And I think, again, going back to the communication, super, super important for us all to do that. And your work is so important for that reason too.
Are you still practicing as a doctor?
I have hospital privileges at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. I am board certified. I am not practicing day to day, but I have my hands in everything, including Emory University too. So, I'm helping other physicians and, helping patients that way.
So I know Helio. I've seen some of their presence for years now, but I don't know it obviously as intimately as you do in your role there, creating content and your role in innovation. So, can you describe what Helio is doing overall and how that might compare or contrast in terms of some of the needs or other offerings in the media marketplace?
Yeah, so I mean, Helio has been around for a very long time, hundreds of years, over 100 years, I think. But specifically, digitally, it's been around for a few decades, and they are basically making sure that doctors have the tools to be able to do their job. So that means that it's not just providing them snippets of information or long pieces of information in various ways, like we talked about, but it's also giving them tools that so that they can do the bedside interaction with patients quicker, more efficiently, and with the best information. And lastly, we also have community, which actually supports their well-being. So mental, physical, and financial well-being for doctors is super important, because if you're not feeling well yourself, you can't really treat patients. Lastly, Dan, I'm so excited. We are actually working on an AI tool, a large language model, which I'm super involved with. And we have an AI strategy group. We want to be leaders in innovation, and that is launching in September at Fierce Healthcare.
I didn't realize that Helio had been around for as many years as it had. It's kind of funny because I encountered it from their podcast presence. So I
Oh,
sort of view it as an audio content perspective, but obviously you've shown me that it's far richer experience than strictly the audio piece. So one of the challenges is having healthcare professionals keep up to date with all the volumes of health information that's coming out day by day, hour by hour. And a lot of times now, I mean, I'm old enough to remember what the world was like before Google existed. And I was a part of the healthcare industry when people in medicine began to comment about the role of Dr. Google in their patient encounters and how that limited 8 to 15-minute encounter was being upended by misinformation or incorrect information and diagnoses, if you will, from Dr. Google. That was 20 years ago. So now we're seeing an even further advance with AI. Where do you think media, some of the key pieces of media and technology, what do you think their roles are in trying to help healthcare professionals do their jobs well as they work to treat patients and populations?
it's funny that you mentioned Dr. Google. I think that doctors got used to that because patients would come in and, give them this information, this handout, basically, or printout that they had from Dr. Google. So that was then. But now it's interesting because I feel like doctors are much more open to kind of using that as a discussion point for whatever the patient wants to talk about. Much more open than they used to be, Dan. I mean, before doctors might have rolled their eyes, now they're like engaging with it. So I think the communication, the fact that the patients are getting that education themselves is a great discussion point. The only caveat I would say is that it depends on the source, right? There's a lot of sources of misinformation now. And certainly there's some stats flying around that 30% of those under 30 are actually getting their health information from social media sites like TikTok and other authorities, celebrity authorities. And so the misinformation crisis is something that's gotten much worse, I think. And so that's another issue that doctors and nurses and healthcare providers kind of have to tackle when a patient brings information in the office. But overall, I think it's empowering for the patient and empowering for doctors to have that education in front of them.
And now we've seen it even accelerate even more with the use of AI and the crawling of so much information and the LLM models really training themselves on volumes of information. And in some ways, it feels like there's a different response from the healthcare professionals that I'm aware of, that they seem to be more open. And in a lot of ways, the AI seems to be assisting. Obviously, there are some problems with it. You can't paint it all with one brush, but there seems to be some positive aspects around the use of AI from informing and reaching members of the public. But where does podcasting come into this? Because you seem to be passionate about podcasting. Your organization seems to really have embraced it. So where does the audio part play into a strategy of an organization with the breadth of content as Helio has?
Yeah, I think that podcasting is an important part of the communication strategy. So, whether it's articles or videos, audio clips, or small, short content pieces, podcasting is an important part of that multimodal strategy. And the other thing is, Dan, and I wonder, I would love your opinion on this, but it seems like there's been a real uptake of people wanting to listen to podcasts, wanting to listen to conversations. And I sometimes wonder whether that's because we're not having that many conversations anymore. I mean, you call the doctor's office and, you are talking to an AI bot, you're looking for information and you'd rather book that airline ticket online. So you're not talking to someone like there's reduced day-to-day small interactions with people. And unfortunately, I do think that, looking at our phones has taken away from our day-to-day conversations as well. Like you walk into a restaurant and there's four people sitting there and they're all looking at their phones. They're not conversing. So I wonder if, the interest in podcast uptake, which is an important interest, is because people actually are wired to listen to conversations.
We have actually dug up some data around studies surrounding the use of audio and podcasts specifically in different communications. I know that more study is required because some of the studies were done in 2021. Well, that was a very different period. If you look at a variety of podcasts across the advent of the pandemic, we saw a huge drop because people's schedules were upended. So where they used to listen to podcasts while they were commuting, they're no longer commuting. So where do they listen to podcasts now? That consumption shifted into dog walks and other activities as the summer came around and different restrictions were lifted or whatever, and people acclimated to this new normal that we had during the pandemic. And now we've continued to see the consumption of podcasts rise. It's being accelerated partly by the embrace of video by things like Google. And I think that video is a component of an engagement strategy. So I say the use of audio and podcasts, recognizing that podcasts can be both video first or audio first. I think what's really important is trying to shift the attention away from a screen. And as people are looking, I seem to encounter a lot of people in my life who are talking about their desire to spend less time on their phone, their frank realization that the phone isn't good for their mental health, that these apps, the news, is putting them in a state of despair, depression, concern, anxiety, and isolation, that they're saying we want to start deleting these apps or actually keeping the phone in the other room or turning it off completely. And I think that being able to consume audio is still a way to be able to engage in content that you want to know and enjoy, but you can do it while you're busy doing other things. And that's what I think is so important for people in healthcare to understand the role that it can play in transmitting the information to professionals and directly to the patients and the public who can utilize this.
Yeah, Dan, I mean, I love the points you're making about media and the phone and, consumption on the phone. I just want to point out as a physician that there's been plenty of data to show the links between overconsumption of media or social media and mental health. And there was a book written about teens and adolescents, but I would say to you that it is very much a phenomenon with adults as well. I think we have to be mindful of it. And I'll just point out one other interesting study that was done. I don't know if you remember a series called 13 Reasons Why about suicide. And it was a, I believe it was a Netflix series. It could have been one of the other streaming series, but there was a study done in Arizona just to monitor what would happen. It was actually retroactive, but they actually, when there was an episode released, there's actually a peak of people coming in with suicidal ideation. So the influence of media, so every time there was an episode released, they would see, like a peak of people coming in with suicide attempts. So the influence of media on our brains is huge. And so, yes, it can actually impact anxiety if you're watching news all day long. Yes, it can cause you to be depressed if you have FOMO and you're on social media and seeing all these beautiful pictures that have been, by the way, filtered and cut and not really the entire life of a person if they happen to be on a beach. And I just can't emphasize enough, Dan, especially in this mental health crisis that we're seeing, how impactful reducing media consumption on the phones is. So, that's another reason I really lean into podcasts. listening to audio conversations between two people is a very human way of consuming the information, not necessarily so when you're doom scrolling.
I've seen you do conversations with just you and one other person, but also I've seen some of your podcasts where you have multiple people on the call, sometimes across continents and oceans. So take us through a little bit of how you approach the content creation process. Do you have certain themes? Are you trying to stay topical based on the news cycle, or are you trying to map out things from a content calendar on an annual basis?
Yeah, I think it's both. I do pay attention to what is new, and especially in the innovation world as it relates to healthcare and AI. But also, I lean very much into issues of public health and population health that are important that need to be elevated. For example, women's health, maternity, pediatrics, mental health. Those are some of my go-to topics because there's a lot of need to disseminate information about this. Lastly, Dan, it's really important to me to elevate thought leadership. So, getting those leaders that are doing amazing work to talk about their work and kind of thread it back to the main themes that we're seeing in the healthcare world.
What's the response been like from the people you serve through Helio? I imagine they don't have to be members. I've listened to your podcast and I'm not a member or paying any sort of subscription. So what's the response like, and how do you guys track it from an ROI or KPI perspective within the organization?
Yeah, the response is great. We actually won an Apex Award for Physicianary, so I'm kind of excited about that. And
Congratulations. That's
thank you
great.
so much. That's because we have amazing teams at Helio that, do a lot of hard work behind the scenes. And also because, we've been able to get some great guests on, Dan, to talk about really important health issues. Helio, obviously, just like any other organization, is interested in engagement metrics. And so they track it on the back end. But I think the vision and purpose for all the podcasts is really to use it as a communication strategy to get really good content out there for doctors to actually listen to and stay up to date. So I think it's a really important part of everything, especially as we said at the very beginning. There's so much research, products, medications that come out, and how do healthcare providers stay on top of that information? And podcasts are super important. Yeah.
Could it be that podcasts are actually part of the solution to address some of the physician overwhelm and burnout that they may be experiencing? I don't want to overstate or be hyperbolic around their role, but just in terms of being able to time shift tasks into different ways, being able to take a brisk walk while you're also staying informed about the information you need to know to do your job. These things could be, mutually beneficial. So do you have any information, anecdotal or scientific, that you could share around that?
Well, I think one of the issues that physicians and healthcare providers struggle with is basically time deficit. So they just don't have time between managing work and shifts and paperwork and life and their families. What do you do? So I do think that podcasts are a great way to consume information on the go. So whether you're in the car or taking that walk, which is a great thing, by the way, please go and take that walk. It's good for you. Or whether you're in the car, or a train ride. I think those are great ways to stay up to date and in an interesting way, right? Like listening to a conversation. The other aspect for physicians that I would point out or healthcare professionals that are interested, is it's a great way to actually elevate the information that you care about, which I love. Like I told you the topics I care about. So it's a great way to actually get out there, get guests to talk about some of the topics that you think are important, thought leadership, and even getting your voice out there and talking about what you think is important. So advocacy is a big part of healthcare, especially I think for doctors and nurses. We want to talk about things that matter and things that can elevate health. So this is a good way to do it.
And for you personally as a professional or for your organization, the podcast content can form a very strong foundation to put other content pillars on top of. I just recently commented on one of your posts where there were four of you doing a podcast, and you posted on LinkedIn. I think it was just a screenshot even of the conversation you were having. So what's your approach in terms of repurposing or allocating this content into other forms of seeking people's attention?
Yeah, well, I think the social media channels are perfect for that. I love LinkedIn, but also we have Helio community where we post information. And of course, there's other social channels too. So it's a great way to kind of pull people back into listening to your podcast. And especially if you want to elevate the topic, that podcast that you were talking about was about global innovation and how AI strategies, there's an AI arms race. If you want to simplify it, globally, and what does that mean for healthcare, and what do the differentiating regulations mean for healthcare? So it was a great topic, and those three doctors were amazing on the podcast. It's actually, I believe, it's being published on August 27th. But yeah, no, I think look, going back to your point, Dan, I think it's great to kind of another way to kind of get out there is to use social media channels. And I do think that's an effective strategy.
So you just brought up an interesting point in terms of AI use and innovation. Where are you seeing AI and podcasting come together, either in the production process or in the dissemination of information side, in terms of making things more discoverable or useful, or pulling in AI as an additional complementary piece of the natural language conversations you're having with humans?
Yeah, I think that AI as a topic is wonderful, but using AI as a tool to help you obviously is super important too. And certainly we've all leaned on, most of us have leaned on LLMs such as ChatGPT to help us, form stories and help us form stories. I don't do it that often, to be honest with you, Dan. If I do it, I'll use it as an adjunct. I'll write the story myself in my head. I think it's a really important skill to kind of know what the theme is and kind of twist it. And storytelling is a really unique art, I think, and takes a lot of creativity. But it's okay to lean on it afterwards to, help you kind of do that. The other way that, AI is really important, and we need to watch out for this, is that AI can mimic voices and people. And you could have, like, I know somebody who has a startup who is doing AI podcasts, and it's all AI driven, like AI sports podcasts, like two people talking, and they sound very real. So I do want to just highlight that, because it is important for us as consumers, as physicians, as leaders, to be aware of what's going on out there, to make sure that, again, going back to the misinformation, that your resources and the people that you are listening to, the podcast you're listening to, are real, true, and have integrity. It's super important. And lastly, AI is just a tool, like it's double-edged sword. You can use it for good and elevate things because of algorithms on social media and your AI goes to the top, or it can be bad in that it puts you into an echo chamber where you're just hearing, because of the algorithm, what you believe in, and you don't get to hear the broad-based information that everyone should actually be aware of. So I think that AI is going to be an important part of content and also podcasts.
So one of the concerns that I have is, where do people find this health content that they're engaging in? And there are podcasts out there by people who have letters and acronyms after the name, and they studied at some of the best schools, but their motivations for creating content is around selling a mattress or a wearable or an oil or a supplement. And that seems to be really the point of the content that they're creating, is to get people to go and make that purchasing decision. And there's nothing inherently wrong, perhaps, based on taking a supplement or, thinking about the way you're preparing your food or things like that. But I think that there could be questions around, where are we putting all of our faith and trust? And I think podcasts are an important way of being able to establish that trust. We've even seen more recently, though, where people are using AI to generate the content, both on video and voice. And even Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, was just in the news just this week, was just in the news with his concerns about people having stolen his identity and making videos. And we're seeing this time and time again from all sorts of different celebrities. So if it can happen to different celebrities, it certainly can happen to medical people. And I think that really underscores the importance of knowing that the content you're creating is authentic and created by real organizations or leaders that have authenticity in the space. That doesn't mean that they all have to be medical doctors or registered nurses or PAs. I had a podcast around digital health, and my experience and authenticity was around someone who's worked to develop these solutions for years, and I certainly am not a medic. So I think that really having some trust in the source of this is really important. What is Helio's sort of approach to that? How do you get the word out about the podcast, and how are people able to engage? I don't recall hearing ads within the podcast. I think you took a mid-break in one of the ones I listened to recently, promoting something else that Helio had, but not taking an external sponsor. So where's the sort of business model, and how do you recommend people find and source the content that they tune into?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Dan. Before I answer that, I just wanted to touch on something that you just said. And just going back to this trust issue, whether you are listening to the podcast or whether you are giving a podcast, trust has to be the foundational, pillar in anything that you do. And I'm just saying that because you should trust the content that you're consuming by making sure it's coming from great sources. But also just going back to selling mattresses. I mean, once you do that as a podcast host or a podcast, it does actually affect your credibility. So when I was at WebMD, for example, and Helio and all the journalistic entities I've worked at, we take trust really seriously. We really do. Like, the content you're going to hear is not going to be promotional for products. So having said that, of course, there's a business model. And that's true of all of these journalistic digital companies, WebMD, Medscape, Helio, all of them basically do have this model where, pharma or other entities might support the content, but we do it in a very careful way so that it doesn't influence the content. So there's almost a church and state division with that. And yes, they can support the content financially, and we all have to have a business model, but we cannot put out content that is biased or selling anything in general. And I hold that that is something that's really important to me personally and and professionally.
Great. And that's actually the driver behind why we created the Health Content Integrity Pledge that we have available on the website for organizations to sort of look at those 7 principles and say, yeah, this makes sense, that we should be focused on facts, and we should delineate where there are opinions expressed, because there certainly can be room for both, but you shouldn't get them mixed up for one or the other. Or if you do have promotional content, which I understand a lot of people do, whether it's for their own organizations or their businesses or something else, that's clearly identified that that's actually promotional content.
Yes.
And then, of course, obviously to stay fact-based on that as well, not to promote some of these things and make it sound like there's scientific evidence behind it if there is not. So I think all those things are really important. Where can people go to find out more about your work and more about the podcasts that are available at Helio?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search me and message me. I'm happy to respond. I love making new friends and talking to people about the commonalities that we all have about making healthcare better. And also, you can find me obviously at Helio as well, Helio Community, Helio, and also I am on Instagram as well.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you taking time to be a part of Health Podcast Summit, all the work that you're doing to share your voice and the voice of your guests, to share this information out to help healthcare providers be more efficient in their work and have access to the latest knowledge. So thank you very much for your time.
Dan, thank you so much for having me.